right. Hello, everybody. It is so great to be here with you today on day 3 of our live Q&A panel portion of the Astrology Summit 3.0, Raising Consciousness and Deepening Your Spiritual Path. My name is Amanda Walsh, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Astrology Hub, and I am so thrilled to be here with all of you. Today, we have a really exciting panel with Becca Tarnas, whose talk that was released today covers astrology as a spiritual practice. Patricia Walsh, whose talk is entitled, Does Anybody Really Know What Time It Is? Chronos versus Kairos. And Sommer, who teaches us how to align with the cycles of time for a better life. Before we move on, I just wanted to tune in with all of you and make sure that you could hear me okay and see us okay. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty before we got started, so I just want to make sure everything's okay. So if you can chat in and just say, yes, we hear you, we're good, that would be fantastic. All right, yay, hi Mary, thank you so much. All right, so now we're good. Wanda, thank you as well. Okay, so Becca, Patricia, and Adam are here to answer your questions. We have been collecting questions and we have some to start, but if you have questions as we go throughout, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. We have been getting through a lot of the live questions that come in, and we are giving Inner Circle members priority access to asking questions. So if you're in the Inner Circle and you want to ask a question, please just make sure and identify yourself. Okay, and before we dive in, I just wanted to start with a little bit of reflection, because one of the things that I love doing about these live events is, or what I love witnessing is more accurate, is how an organic theme always starts to come through to the surface. There's some message that wants to be heard through an event like this. And this happens over and over whenever we do something like this. And I love watching the process. And so one of the things that I'm noticing come up over and over in both the live Q&A panels and then as a thread throughout many of the talks of the summit is that things may not be as dark as they seem. I brought this up yesterday and suggested a book from a man named Steven Pinker. It's called Enlightenment Now. And the idea is that although we hear about many of the negative things that are happening on the planet right now, it actually might not be the case that things are as bad as they seem. And there's actually significant science and research that actually shows that things aren't as bad as they seem, that there's more light than we realize. So I want to combine this idea with some of the ideas that have been coming through from our quantum astrologers and the quantum physicists that you've heard from and that you will continue to hear from throughout the week. And I'm going to paraphrase this very complex idea just in the interest of time. But the idea is that in order for something to exist, it actually needs an observer. And the observer is what brings it into reality. So what's starting to come together, I think, is a thread throughout this event, is that the more we focus on the growing light on this planet, the more real it becomes. The more we focus on things like there are over 12,500 people registered for this event right now. So these people all over the globe who are interested in contributing and being a part of this conversation around consciousness and spiritual path and how they can actually live a life of more purpose and meaning. The more that we pay attention to the small kindnesses that happen in our day-to-day reality, things that happen, someone opening the door for you, someone picking up something that you I just got a message, Stephanie, that said that, okay, never mind. Okay, so the more we focus on the kindnesses and the goodness all around us, so the more we focus on the light, the more we bring it into reality. And the more we focus on the growing or ominous darkness, the more real it becomes. And we have a choice every day, every minute. We get to decide what we want to give our energy. And this doesn't mean that we're never sad, doesn't mean that we're never afraid, doesn't mean that we're never down, doesn't mean that we ignore the darkness, it doesn't mean that we ignore the things that are happening on our planet that are not great. But it does mean that we can shine our light and we can do our work and we can be of service and we can do it in joy. And that we can ditch the angst and the fight and the stress, that we can just contribute our light and know that it's growing and growing and growing every single day. So just sit with that and see how that resonates or doesn't. But what I take away from all of it is that I want to thank you for being here, for putting your attention on this event, for putting your attention on all the light that is really encapsulated in all these different talks that we are highlighting, in all the speakers that we are giving an opportunity to lend their voice, and all the light that all of you are contributing to this event, and all the enthusiasm and all of the kindness that I see in the chat and I see in our Facebook community, and everywhere that you are, there's more light and it's growing all the time. So I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for lending your energy to something that is really intended to grow more light, more consciousness on this planet. All right. A few reminders. If you are not registered for this event, it's not too late. You can go to summit.astrologyhub.com. It's free. You can find out more details about it when you go to that page. Also a reminder that you still have access to yesterday's talks from the Leo King, Eric Myers, and Sahara Rose. We've received great feedback on these talks, so please, if you can, make some space to watch those. If you know that you're swamped and there's no way you're going to be able to get to all the talks that you want, you still have the opportunity to purchase the upgrade package at the event price of $97. We're going to put the link in the chat for more information on that. And with that, you get all the videos, all the audios, all the transcripts, and you get the 23 spiritual practices that all the speakers gave at the end of their talks. You also get all of the bonus gifts in one easy place to access, and lifetime access to those as well. All right, so without further ado, I would love to give our speakers an opportunity to introduce themselves. Becca, can we start with you? Becca Tarnas.
Sure. Hi, I'm Becca Tarnas, and I'm speaking to you from Berkeley, California. And I'm a scholar and artist, an archetypal astrologer, and I recently finished my PhD work at the California Institute of Integral Studies in philosophy and religion, and I now teach at Pacifica Graduate Institute. And it's a real pleasure to be here and to get to be in dialogue with Patricia and Adam and the audience, and of course with Amanda as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Becca, so I said her talk is entitled Astrology is a Spiritual Practice. She also is offering all of you a free gift, the back of Beyond presentation. Becca, do you want to tell us just a brief what that's about?
Sure. So this is a presentation that was filmed in Prague actually about a year ago, and in it is really the core of the thesis actually that I wrote my PhD on, and it's about the synchronicity between Carl Gustav Jung, the depth psychologist, his Red Book, which is a book of recording active imaginations, fantasies, and it's a huge, exquisite book. And so parallels between that Red Book and the Red Book of J.R.R. Tolkien. The Red Book of Tolkien is actually The Lord of the Rings. And there's these remarkable parallels between the two in timing, images, text, really surprising things. So that became my thesis, and this presentation, it's filled with artwork and images and is an introduction to that work.
All right, Dominique says, I watched it today, Becca, so interesting, thank you. So we already have people tuning into that. Okay, great. Adam, how about you? Just a brief intro. Yeah.
Yeah, I can do it brief. So I'm Adam. I am the host of a podcast that's in transition at the moment. For 9 years, it's been called Exploring Astrology. And I'm about to go on this trip to Greece. And when I return, it's going to have a whole new theme to it. And it's going to be called what my site is called, Holes to Heavens. And I'm going to focus a little bit more on story, I think, moving forward. And astrology, of course, is going to be a part of it. But yeah, my journey has been talking to astrologers and like-minded people from all over the world for the past 9 years. I'm a full-time astrologer. I teach, I write, and yeah, I'm happy to be here.
All right. So Adam, your talk is about aligning with the cycles of time.
Right, synodic cycles.
Synodic cycles, and then you also gave a free gift that's Mercury's Cycles class, a 2-hour deep dive into the synodic cycles of Mercury. Is there anything that you want to tell the audience about that gift?
It's a good time to listen to that class, and that Mercury is behind behind the sun at the moment, so it's technically like the midpoint of Mercury's cycle, and it's something that most people don't really pay much attention to. They pay attention to Mercury retrogrades, for instance, but not these other parts of the Mercury cycle, which I think when you pay attention to it and you're really diligent in, say, creating your own red book every 116 days or something like that with Mercury or with any of the cycles, there's a lot that you can glean from tracking cycles.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. And Patricia.
Hi, I'm in Vermont at the moment. I I've been a regression therapist and trainer for 20 years, 20 plus years. I've taught all over the world. The style of regression therapy that I work with was founded by a Jungian, Dr. Roger Wolger. I've worked with him for many years until he passed away, and our style of work is more like past life soul retrieval and also current life soul retrieval. I'm an evolutionary astrologer. I've been working in the human psyche again for 20-something years. And I wrote a book back almost 10 years ago now, Understanding Karmic Complexes. I've also designed a new training program, which is launching next year, Kairos Astrology, which is using experiential methods drawn from transpersonal psychology and working within the human psyche on how to bridge this inner and outer world, right? The Kairos space, how to enhance the Kairos space and bring these experiential methods more into astrology rather than making it just a kind of cognitive behavioral being talked at. And I've been doing that for 20-something years, and I finally designed it into a training program. So I'm excited about that. And I think I said when we did our Facebook Live, I really enjoyed the overall explanation of what the summit was about, and it really fit where my head is at right now. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for being here. So Patricia's talk is about Kairos and
Kronos versus Kairos. Does anybody really know what time it is? Does anybody really know what the title is?
Exactly. And you also are giving the audience a free gift, which is Multidimensional Astrology, Engaging the Living Soul of the Archetypes, which is a lecture that you gave. Is there anything you want to add to that gift or add about that gift?
Well, in that I'd actually detail specific ways, or I give an overarching picture of how might one apply Gestalt, how might one apply principles from psychodrama, how one might want to employ active imagination and journeying when it comes to, you know, being in contact with these living beings that we know of as archetypes, rather than getting into this, you know, putting them in a box with a bunch of keywords. So let's, you know, open up to experience them directly. So the talk has that in it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to have all three of you here today. Let's start to dive into the questions. An IC member, Navenka, asks, IC is what we call the inner circle. Astrology activates my left brain, and as a spiritual practice, it seems contrary to meditation, which is a more holistic process. And this is for Becca, I'm sorry. How can astrology be a spiritual practice when it is so left brain?
It's a great question. And I feel as though there are multiple facets to astrology, and there is the necessary side of understanding the technique and, you know, really focusing on you know, studying a number of charts, historical examples, and so forth. But just as Patricia was speaking to a moment ago, there is this element of developing one's, what James Hillman called the archetypal eye, and of developing that capacity to perceive the ways that the planetary archetypes, the archetypes living through each one of us, come through in their multivalence. And that, I feel, is in some sense a form of meditation, though with content, with images. So rather than a meditation where we try and empty our consciousness and come to this place of stillness, rather it's more of a working with an image, or working with coming to a deeper understanding of what these archetypes are through practices such as active imagination or altered states of consciousness and so on. Very much in line with what Patricia is speaking to.
Exactly.
I would love to hear, Patricia or Adam, your reflections on that question too. It's such a great question.
It is. It's exactly where my work has been. When I do chart readings with people, I do interpretation. I've been doing that for 20-something years. What I'm so much more excited about is the astrologer as midwife. And that's exactly why I'm into wanting to teach people how to midwife somebody's own wisdom. I mean, you are living your archetypes. And for you to be able to engage that, it might sound like it's complicated, but it's not. There's really simple techniques. As Becca was saying, active imagination, journeying imagery, one image, and I believe it was, not sure if it was Hillman that said this, but about you could hold one image in your mind and examine that for your whole life, and it will only continue to take you deeper into, the cavern of your soul. And so imagery is so rich, and I think why we're so inured to it is because we're exposed to too much of it. But the problem is we're exposed to other people's images, not our own. 500 to 1,000 images a day you're exposed to, and they captivate your imagination for the use of marketing. Right? Like imagine yourself in this great house or with this great boyfriend or whatever. The point is, our creative imagination is our soul's very lifeblood. And that is what your connection is to the cosmos. That is where the archetypes speak to you. So I think in some ways there's a kind of, exactly as Becca was saying, when you're learning music, you learn the riff, but then eventually after you've learned the structure, your own soul expresses itself through that modality. And astrology is exactly that. As well as there's also ways to learn astrology experientially that aren't about the keywords and the so on and so forth. That can be a part of it, but there's ways to actually draw in the archetypes and learn them directly on that archetypal ground.
Beautiful. So many things there that are just so rich. And I think, when you said, you were talking about music, the thing I thought of immediately was I practice hula. So I was thinking about, in dance, it's the same. You learn the technique, you learn the choreography. It's very technical. And then once you own that, then you express it. And that's when it becomes beautiful. And that's when it becomes spiritual. And that's when it becomes inspiring. So it's the same, exactly. Right? I mean, it's a process. Yeah. Adam, is there anything you want to add to that question?
Yeah.
Great.
I think so. I think that the left brain can only get you so far with the study of astrology or spirituality, which I guess is the question, right? Which also means that chart study, books, readings with astrologers can only get you so far. And it's like, what does that transition look like to the other side of the brain? And I think it has a little bit to do with tuning, what I like to think of as like Hermes' third ear. Like we know the third eye, but there's also this third ear that is present, which is present when we are paying attention to synchronicity and symbols, and we understand how to translate what a hunch is when we say look at a chart, or a cue when we're actually sitting with the client, whatever that might be. But there's messages always coming in, and whether it is like in a space with a client, like if it's just in the meditation, like you can engage directly, like the talk that I gave on Mercury cycles, like engaging and actually having a dialogue with these planets, because they are archetypes, they are alive and well. And I think that if you establish a relationship with these energies, then I mean you have a new friend, first of all, but also there's a lot that you can learn from the old wizard Hermes or Mercury, right? Like there's so much with all the planets, and they have different time scales, and they have different voices and ways that they communicate, parts of the body that maybe is a little bit more present for you as well. And so to me, that's a deeply spiritual practice, learning how to listen like that.
Thank you so much for all of your answers on that. And I just want to ask the audience, have you had a reading with an astrologer that felt left brain? You know, where it was just sort of like the facts, looking at your chart and just keywording it, you know, and putting it together in a kind of methodical fashion. And then have you had one that touched your spirit, you know, that actually like spoke to you on a level that was beyond the surface? I would love to hear if you've had those experiences. My first experience with an astrologer was Natasha Alter, who's an evolutionary astrologer. And so I thought all astrology was like that. You know, I thought it was all soul-based. I thought it was all spiritual. And then I realized the more I've been doing Astrology Hub that it's absolutely not, that there are some that are just much more straightforward and cut and dry. So, you know, at Astrology Hub, we tend to favor the ones that integrate both really well, just acknowledging that we are, you know, we have both. We are left and right brain. We are mind and heart. And so it's important to speak at both levels. But I just would love to hear from you if you've had different experiences and how they left you and which ones you found more helpful or useful in your life. So curious about that. All right. Let's see. So Becca, though, actually, I just asked you a question. So let me go to Adam. An Inner Circle member, Renee, asked, do you have a class or a podcast that will discuss when the cycles will occur with this upcoming Venus retrograde?
Have I done it? The most recent one with Adam Gainsbourg, we briefly talk about it. We mainly talk about Mars in that podcast, but we definitely hint at some of the themes of the upcoming Venus cycle. I was supposed to be teaching a class this Wednesday on it, but there's just too much going on in my world before I go off to Greece this weekend. So I'm not going to be doing that. I've written a few articles on it, and you can find those on my website. And there's a few classes that I've done on Venus cycles that are available on my site too.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. All right, Patricia, Inner Circle member Katrina asks, do I need to ask Mars to participate in a conversation with Saturn in Aries?
Well, let me see if I understand the question. So you're saying your natal position is Saturn in Aries, and then you're wondering if Mars is involved in that confluence, yes? Did I read that right?
I think so, yes.
Okay, totally, absolutely. But I mean, Aries itself as an archetype, so I would start there. I mean, certainly the interesting thing is, how does Saturn energy carry that Aries energy, right? But Aries alone as an archetype is going to carry the Mars energy. So I would say if you want to get into a conversation or an embodiment or an image, right? Like you want to close your eyes and get an image, start with Aries, add Saturn, and then see what you get. Then go from there. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, okay, let us know if it does. All right, so Catherine asked, and this is a general question for any of you, she's also an Inner Circle member, I would like to hear about what we can expect with the babies that were born during the retrograde storm / eclipse portal in the summer. So many retrogrades. What energies can we expect to see these children bring into our world? Does anyone want to answer that one?
Well, I would say you mentioned evolutionary astrology, which is my foundation. In evolutionary astrology, retrogrades are looked at as individuating forces. So people born with lots of retrogrades they're meant to kind of do it their own way. And I think that, well, you know, we could say a lot about what is the epoch and the era and what we're living in and what we're seeing crumbling and rebuilding. But we certainly need a lot of those people on the planet. We're going to need them in the next 10 to 20 years. To bring in new visions, right? So somebody who has a lot of retrogrades is going to have to, or is, you know, used in the proper, I hate to say proper, sorry, in the highest form, they're individuating, innovating. It's a Uranian archetype. So any planet that's retrograde, you can look at it as having a touch of Uranus. And we're going to need, like I said, a lot of that energy rebuilding.
Great.
Thank you, Patricia. Anyone else want to take that one?
You want to go, Becca, or you want me to go?
You go first.
Okay. I love when people ask me this. It's such a trick question, in my opinion, asking about little ones. What I would focus on is the Mars theme of the summer. It's unique period for Mars to be retrograde in Aquarius. It's the rarest place that Mars goes retrograde, and it's been dancing. Actually, I think tomorrow it visits the South Node again. Tomorrow. And so depending on when in the summer that kiddo was born, Mars is going to be very close to the South Node. And the way I see it, Mars is close, Mars is strong, Mars is retrograde, and it's also integrated with the South Node. And so all these kids are going to have very accentuated Mars in their lives. And so we have these little digital warriors that are coming into a world that we can't even imagine what it's going to be like in 18 years. I mean, it's exponential, the growth that we're moving into. And the worry that I have, even for any kids I have in my life, is finding ground, like knowing what nature is, knowing really what it's like to be human. Because, I mean, there is a singularity of some sort coming. And I think that it's going to be very important to understand how to differentiate life in the machine and life outside the machine. It's all in Aquarius as well. And so that's my main concern for really all the younger generations, even us, moving forward. So yeah, but there's some sort of a Mars theme. There's a strength of character with all these little kiddos this summer. I can say that.
Adam, I could say that your concern is one of the main reasons why I moved from New York City to Hawaii 7 years ago, was just that, you know, I had one on the way and a little girl. And I was like, wow, if she never knows what nature is and never has had that experience, it's going to be hard to even realize what she's missing, you know, or what a natural experience would feel like. So, and what you said about we as the adults losing touch with that, I feel like that's a call or a reminder for all of us to make sure we get outside and get some sunshine and get fresh air. And, you know, we're all sitting in front of a computer right now, but, you know, having that balance so that we continue to connect with the wisdom and intelligence of nature too. And so many of you astrologers are reminding us to get out and look at the sky and, you know, be aware of like, oh, it was a full moon last night. How did I experience that? Okay, Becca, do you want to take that question too?
Yeah, and I'll just build on what's already been said. And Adam, I'm glad you brought up Mars in that way, even dancing with Mars. I feel like I've gotten to know the Martian archetype in a way this summer that I never have before. And it's been a remarkable process of deepening that relationship. And so there is that very potent you know, Mars square Uranus energy that's been there all summer. And I love that term of technological warriors. In terms of all the retrogrades that were happening, it felt to me over the course of the summer that it was like in terms of the quality of each of those archetypes coming through, is like a reduction, not in terms of a reduction in the culinary sense or the phenomenological sense, where the qualities become concentrated and slow down. And so just thinking of that in terms of the children born this summer, if there will be that kind of rich or potent reduction quality coming through with those particular planets that were in retrograde. And I also do want to mention, and this is a larger time scale, but that children being born right now are coming into the beginning of this Saturn-Pluto conjunction that's going to be tightening in over the next 2 years, going to be in orb the next 3 years. And so much of this conversation around how heavy the world feels right now is so correlated with that incoming conjunction. And I just think of the children that are born at the beginning of that alignment and will live their first few years of life in that zeitgeist, and how that will shape their outlook on the world, their moral sensibility, their gravitas and foundation going forward. And I just looking at a kind of historical connection, that we can't even call them children now, the teenagers that came forward from after the shooting in Florida, they're born with, they're 18 years old, 17, 18 years old, with the Saturn-Pluto opposition from the beginning of this century, and they're stepping forward against gun violence, just as the Saturn-Pluto conjunction now is coming back into the field. And so it makes me think, what will these children being born now be the kind of moral authorities in the future, and what future alignments of Saturn and Pluto will they step into their own? So just to speak to that larger theme.
All right, thank you, everybody. Becca, if we have time, I'd love to hear more about your different experience of Mars this summer, because I think a lot of people can probably relate with that, and I'd love to hear how that was for you. Becca, question for you from Susan, who says, do you see the correlation in astrology to the red books? If so, where?
That's a huge question that I could take a long time answering, so I'll give a really brief one. So the brief answer that I will give is that Carl Jung, his red book experience, these visions that first started coming to him spontaneously, and then he developed with active imagination, deepened into, that began in 1913 under a Uranus-Neptune opposition. So you can see Uranus as the awakening to the Neptunian reality, the sudden opening to the Neptunian imaginal, and the world of the collective unconscious. And the second red book, Tolkien's, Tolkien was writing his first stories of Middle Earth under that same alignment of Uranus opposite Neptune. If we fast forward to the middle of the 20th century, the next alignment of Uranus and Neptune, there's a square between those two planets. And that's the period when The Lord of the Rings is published, this great work of imaginal fantasy, published in 1954 and 55. And that's also the same decade, that same alignment, that Jung was bringing forward his final major works, Mysterium Conjunctionis and so forth. And he also did the interviews with Aniela Jaffe that became the basis of the book Memories, Dreams, Reflections, which is generally considered Jung's autobiography, but of course it's kind of co-created with Aniela Jaffe. And then if we go forward once more to the most recent conjunction of Uranus and Neptune in the 90s, this was when the films of The Lord of the Rings were all produced. Likewise, it's the same period, right at the end of that Uranus-Neptune conjunction, that the decision was made by the heirs of Jung to publish the Red Book. It wasn't actually brought forward until 2009 because it took 13 years of editing to bring it forward. But it's interesting to see this kind of diachronic patterning with the Uranus-Neptune cycle and the real connection to the imaginal, to the sudden opening in and crossing a threshold into another world, into another realm that is present in both Jung's and Tolkien's works in their Red Books.
Thank you so much, Becca. Okay. This question has come in 2 days in a row. I definitely want to address it. Kathleen is asking, and this is a general for any one of you, any advice on reading for transsexual people? Have we stumped
reading or book reading? Like reading art for them?
No, reading. No, an astrology reading.
Doing a reading.
Okay. Yeah.
I've had so many different people in my practice, and clearly that's been some of it. I think it depends on, I mean, rather than, I'm not sure what the basis of the question is, but I've worked with people in transition, and I've worked with people that are just coming out. I've worked with people that are slightly prior to their awareness, that maybe they have they have some kind of gender identification, or like I said, they're still in the closet. So that's more the issue. What is the person bringing to the session, and how can, what you can offer them help them facilitate wherever their consciousness is at, and if they're in transition, how that is affecting their psyche, or if they're just coming out of the closet, how are you going to support them in what they might meet in themselves and others. I guess it's just from my experience. I've experienced so many different levels of where people are at with that. To me, the reading is always about what is the person bringing to it, and what can I help them with in that moment to help evolve their consciousness and support them.
Okay.
So I could definitely add then. I thought it was
just let me add one more thing that she says. Kathleen says, realize that, but most programs to generate a chart ask male or female.
Oh. Create other. Ask the programmers to create other.
We need that.
Yeah, I too have, worked with a lot of folks around this, and there's been, I think, around 3 now working with men that reach out to me thinking if it's a good idea to really go through the transition and go through the surgery. And interestingly, all 3 of them were pre-Saturn return, so they were in their late 20s. And the one I remember most, because I got a follow-up email years later, was Mars-Saturn conjunction in the 8th house, and it was related to the nodes, and Saturn had not yet returned. And then the question was serious, like, I think I'm going to do this surgery. Should I do it? And I don't tell people what to do in my sessions, but of course, working with that question, it's a very sensitive topic. But my suggestion in that session was like, if you can wait until the Saturn return is over, I do think clarity will form in a much more tremendous sense inside of you, just so you don't regret going through that transition, being 26 years old or whatever he was at the time. And I got an email years later afterwards thanking me for suggesting patience around it and postponing the treatment because he didn't go through with it. It didn't happen. And I mean, it made me feel good about like doing my job in a tricky situation like that. Like, I don't often encounter that in readings, but it has happened a few times. And so it's just holding space for whatever it is they need most. And of course, casting no judgment, not projecting, not trying to steer them away from whatever they know in their soul to be true. So
I'll just jump in and mention that I feel one of the approaches that I take is looking at the spectrum of meanings of each of the archetypes, planetary archetypes as they come through, and that I think astrological language can really help us break down gender binaries. And we often try and speak about masculine qualities and feminine qualities, and it keeps creating this polarity. And having the pantheon of that astrology gives us can allow us to describe qualities, the assertiveness or even aggression of Mars, or the nurturing and caretaking of the moon. And they're associated with the lunar archetype, with the Martian archetype, or and so on. And we can then not have to speak of that in terms of gender, and that we can rather recognize in some ways the many persons living through each of us as individuals, and that it need not be split into this binary. I think it's particularly helpful when we are trying to speak to something that has, for so long been called masculine and feminine, but it is far more complex and diverse. And in some ways, even though astrology for so many is quite controversial, in some ways that astrological language of solar and lunar, Venusian and Martian, it takes away the charge that is put when you say, oh, that quality is masculine, that quality is feminine. So just wanted to add that.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Okay, this question's for Adam. Ilona asks, you shortly mentioned medicine during your talk. Can you give any tips where and how to learn more about herbs and planets and cycles, etc., beyond the lunar cycle?
Yeah, this is where I can plug my retreat, Amanda.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So my dear friend, Sherry Hupfer, who's been on a guest or has been a guest on my show many times. I have this little segment called Plants and Planets on my podcast. And she's a master herbalist. She does spagyric work and she's quite eloquent. She's an amazing being. And she's coming to the retreat. And I'm going to give up a slot or two of my talks to allow her to work her magic with spagyrics. And so there's not going to be any like wild crafting at this, but it's kind of a seed that her and I are planting to future events that we plan on doing probably here in Colorado, where there'll be like a week-long intensive where there will be like harvesting with planets, making medicine in perfect moments and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a bunch of Plants and Planets shows on my podcast. And then that transition I spoke about earlier, how my show is going to be renamed The Holes to Heavens. There's going to be much more medicine talk on my show. So yeah, just subscribe to the podcast and you'll get filled in like that.
Perfect. Okay. Question for Patricia. An IC member, Susan, asks, can you talk a bit about how soul retrieval and regression assists in understanding our astrological blueprint?
Yeah, basically I wrote an entire book about it. Oh, I guess I get to plug my book. Actually, I did write an entire book about it that was based on 10 years of research and several thousand case studies. So, using I didn't set out to do that. I was just regressing people and teaching people all over the world and had access to their students and my students. And what I was doing was plotting people's charts and then writing their stories on the back of their charts and then turning over the chart and looking at it. According to the evolutionary astrology paradigm, Pluto and the nodes is the basis. It's more complicated than that, but we'll just start there and go, oh my God, there it is in black and white. Like, you can't make this up. So it's like the most empirical you can get when it comes to such esoteric subjects as past lives and astrology. But basically, I put together several thousand case studies and then came up with an ontology of how the archetypes act in past life experiences. Again, not based on speculation, but based on this is how it's arisen from people's consciousness. So, gee, if, I have, several thousand case studies of people with a Pluto in the 4th house and they've had difficult childhood traumas in a past lives, we can assume that it has something to do with childhood wounding, all the things we might associate with the Cancer archetype. So basically, yeah, I wrote a book by archetype that shows how these archetypes express themselves in past life experiences, and that then leads to understanding that signature in one's chart. Like I said, with evolutionary astrology, the foundation is always to look, or the backbone, the x-ray of the chart is to look at Pluto and the nodes. So you start there, but then of course, as we know, it can get a little more complicated. And I actually, Jeffrey Wolf Green wrote the foreword to my book and said she just proved the evolutionary astrology paradigm. Because I did, because he has special rules that he kind of built in there, like squares to the nodes, which modifies how the past life and how the North Node and South Node acts. They actually both act as active archetypes within the past life. And literally, and the squaring planet also figures very big. And literally, this is what my cases showed. Thousands of people with Saturn square the nodes came up with certain kinds of stories anyway. So, like I said, the standard signature can get a little more complicated when you bring in squares or when you bring in rulers of the nodes or when you bring in aspects to rulers, it can get a little complicated in the interpretation. But, you can start with understanding Pluto, and then you can expand from Pluto and the nodes. So, Jeffrey's book on Pluto, The Evolutionary Journey, kind of outlines Pluto from an archetypal perspective. What are some of the complexes? What are some of the soul wounds, the samskaras? And my book, Understanding Karmic Complexes, outlines bringing in the nodes, the kinds of situations, and the kind of karmic complexes by astrological archetypes. So you can apply it to your chart quite easily, actually.
Very nice. Patricia, one more time, the name of your book?
Understanding Karmic Complexes. It's Cohen, Evolutionary Astrology and Regression Therapy.
Understanding Karmic Complexes.
Evolutionary Astrology and Regression Therapy.
Okay, great. All right.
Thanks.
Question for you, Becca. Howard asks, what's your take on the upcoming January 2020 Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn?
Well, it's, I believe that's the first time it comes exact, but at least from the perspective I take, I generally look, kind of using world transit historical perspective at the first time two or more planets come within orb with each other through the last time they leave. So when when Saturn and Pluto are exact in the conjunction, that's the most kind of potent moment, and that happens a few times throughout the cycle. But from the perspective that I take is that this is kind of one arc with like peaks and valleys, you could say. So my general take is, if we look back through history at times that Saturn and Pluto have been in hard alignment, it does tend to correlate with periods of major, crisis or contraction of some kind, conservative empowerment, of splitting the shadow of othering. And, we're seeing these themes around the world. This is that heaviness and that darkness that Amanda was speaking to at the beginning. And, with that question of perhaps it's not as bad as it really seems. One of the perspectives that I take, and one of the kind of approaches that I hold when working with the Saturn-Pluto complex, whether in the birth chart or as a personal transit, or especially as a world transit, is that especially looking at that tendency to split, a psychological splitting, to see what we don't want to own in ourselves, the shadow outside of us, projecting it onto other people, that the work really lies, the individual work, the community work lies in recognizing that shadow within ourselves. And my take is not only to cultivate and look for the light, but also to recognize in some way that the darkness has its own light, and to learn how to see within, to see our own darkness. Carl Jung says in his Red Book, actually, know that the line of good and evil runs through your own heart. And I think that's such an important perspective to hold, that when there is this tendency at the individual level, definitely at the political and national level, to project our shadow onto other people, other nations, which is what brings about international conflict or interpersonal conflict, to recognize that those things that we project outward are also within us. And how do we face that? How do we look at that? And I think and integrate it in a healthy way. And I think that's usually through our own deep inner individual work, and also in engaged community work as well. And I think those are some of the approaches that I want to be bringing into this Saturn-Pluto gestalt that is continuing to saturate our collective field.
Very nice. Okay. This is an important topic. I don't know if Adam or Patricia want to add anything to it, but that upcoming conjunction in 2020 and what that means.
Yeah, I would totally love to riff off Becca because we're so on the same page, you know, kind of coming from that transpersonal background. I've been doing a lot of pondering about it. Not that I'm going to make any predictions, but and I'm actually in the talk that I gave for this summit. At the end, I actually have a slide on there that shows techniques of how to touch into one's shadow. And how to, you know, how to be able to start to discern it, because it's so critical. It's not just the Saturn-Pluto conjunction coming up, but we've been in it since Pluto went into Capricorn, right? So we already have that marriage. So look, if you want to look at what's going to happen with Pluto and Saturn conjunction, go back to 2008 when Pluto went into Capricorn. What happened? We have been in, as Becca said, a contraction. It's a winter energy. So, you know, we had a global recession like the second Pluto went into Capricorn. So if that tells you anything, another thing, Becca, when you were talking about Jung and his shadow quotes, another one that's attributed to him is that Jung said, when you don't deal with your shadow, it becomes more and more cartoon and caricature-like. Well, look at the current administration. Look at the news every day. It's so caricature-like. And, you know, in a way, and I'm not putting the U.S. above every nation, but certainly the tone, the cultural, global tone has been set by the U.S. for a while. The U.S. is preparing for its Pluto return. And it's all kind of coinciding around the same time. So the U.S. is yet to become an ensouled nation, even though we're looked at, you know, people look at the youth of the U.S. We are going through a maturing process, and what we are experiencing now as a nation is I wouldn't say it's the purging of shadow, but it certainly is the outing of shadow, because we have a lot of unprocessed karma. People, you know, we like to hide behind our persona, again, depending on which chart you use for the U.S., be it the Sagittarius ascendant or the Gemini ascendant, the Sibley chart, or otherwise. You know, we project a persona of freedom, and people have bought that because we're really good at marketing the American dream, like globally. And now it's kind of like we have to really manifest it, right? You know, there's an imperative in the U.S.'s chart with the nodes in Aquarius, Leo. So this maturing process that the U.S. is going through, this kind of opening up of shadow, I think, as Becca was saying, the Pluto-Saturn thing makes it an even more critical. We're coming into the ending stages of the synod that happened in Libra, right? And Becca, when you were talking about othering, that othering has been increasing. The polarities have been increasing because the archetype of Libra itself, or one spectrum of the meaning, is about extremity. It's splitting to find balance, splitting to find balance. It's not inherently balanced. So we've been in the theme for the last 30-something years of the Pluto-Saturn-Libra synod. So that splitting that we're seeing is now kind of coming to a head because that's balsamic, right? So, I mean, archetypally, it's balsamic until the next new synod starts, and then we have a Capricorn theme. So I guess I guess I'd put out to you guys too, where do you see that leading? If you think of the last 30 years that have been very Libra, that now come into Capricorn, right? So I would say, Amanda, back to what you said in the beginning about the darkness, and you were saying, you know, do people believe that it's not as bad as it is? You know what I was thinking when you were saying that, it was like, you know what, I don't care which way you think it is. If you think that, you know, evil is on the rise and it's taking over our planet, or you think, you know what, maybe it's not so bad, I need to focus on the light. I think either way we need, right? I think that's a kind of imperative. So whichever side of the fence you fall on, I think either way, we need to magnetize that, which will be part of the Pluto-Saturn rebuilding of the structures.
You said either way, but then you cut out when you said that. Either way.
Oh, I'm saying either way, either you think, evil is on the rise or that it's not as bad as we think it is. Either way, we need to be focusing on what is the vision, what's going to arise, because the next Pluto-Saturn is in Capricorn. So we've been watching the structures of our society shaking. And unfortunately, the younger generations are being born into this, right? But that's what I was saying about what I was saying about the retrograde and Adam. You were talking about Mars and Aquarius. I mean, that is an individuating energy, right? So they are the ones that are going to help rebuild all of these things that we thought were so sure that now we're not so sure about anymore. And they haven't completely, we're still in this kind of balsamic energy, of things ending. Yeah. I don't know if they're going to fall or not, but if they do, they're going to need rebuilding, right?
Well, and one of the things yesterday that was said is we're basically like in the funeral, like we're in the
that's it, yeah.
Part. Yeah, and that, I mean, one of the things you're talking about, things being exposed. So it's like the shadow is being brought to light, and we're in the process of birthing something new. I mean, when something's dying, something new is coming forth. So what you just said about focusing on the vision of what that is versus on the tragedy of the old falling.
Well, let's put it this way. The old structures don't work. I mean, we're sick of them. The patriarchy, right? Like, we're over it. So yes, we're in the kind of death throes of that. The dinosaurs are still screaming, they're in the death throes. But and I think so many people, not, present company included, and anybody who would be listening to this, we are the kind of people that think about what is a better vision for where we are or where we could be.
Right. Brilliant. Adam, do you want to add anything to this?
Sure. There's a lot of talk always about Pluto moving into Capricorn and Obama becoming president and the market crashing and all of this, but oftentimes what's overlooked was what was born in the rubble of that moment in time, which was Bitcoin. And the future, according to many, is going to be decentralized. And it doesn't really matter what you think about Bitcoin or not. The technology of blockchain and decentralization is here, and it's not going anywhere. And as long as the lights stay on, it's going to be a very bright future for many people. And there's a lot of clever ways people are figuring out to work with this technology to save forests, to save the ocean, to save industries, to save a lot of people's lives and to a great extent. And so I'm very excited about the future around that. It's a fruitful darkness, in my opinion. And there's also, since everyone's quoting Jung, I think this is a Jung thing, or maybe it's one of his students, but a population projects its shadow onto its leader. It's like, okay, we got Trump, but like, what happens if it's Kanye? What happens if it's like some other crazy goon, right? Like, we're just going to continue projecting our shadow, like what's happening, I think, as the convergence occurs through social media and everyone is so connected. It's crazy out there. And aside from your hair kind of turning red, Becca, with Mars this summer, I've never experienced so much Mars attack upon me in my life. And I've been doing this podcast like live, public, doing it like this for 9 years. And it was just absurd. Just people losing their minds over like certain things I say. Even this blockchain, people come at me like, Bitcoin is not going to happen. Like, you're crazy. It's like, I don't care if it happens or not, but it's a good idea. And it came in 2008. Like, the first Bitcoin's mined in January of 2008. And what's so fascinating about the Genesis block chart is it's the most powerful Mars I've ever seen in any chart I've ever looked at. It's Mars in Capricorn, exalted, in the 6th house. It's joy, conjunct the sun and Pluto. It's a profound thing. And a lot of people talk about, there's like articles all over online about how Bitcoin's died over 1,000 times. And literally the news has reported Bitcoin dead since 2008, over and over and over and over and over again, but it's still here. And I really do not think it's going anywhere. And it's not just the Bitcoin, it's the technology. I just want to make that clear of what decentralization and blockchain represents for the next wave of technology. And perhaps these little Mars and Aquarius retrograde kiddos, they're just going to, slide right into it, and they're going to understand exactly what to do with it.
What you're talking about too is not just Bitcoin, but what you said, the technology behind it, but even further, it's not only the technology behind it, but it's the idea behind it of decentralization in general. Because if
power to the people.
If you think power to the people, if you think about it, even crowdfunding is a way to decentralize who gets funding for projects, or in the media realm, YouTube and all these other ways. This Astrology Hub is capitalizing on the decentralization of information dissemination.
You should start your own coin, Amanda. You can do that. And then people can incentivize your content by giving you Astrology Hub coins.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I'm serious.
Music, if you look across all the industries and all the different facets of life, it's all becoming decentralized. And that whole concept of power to the people is really what's behind all of it. People want to have a voice. They don't want it to be centralized in one institution, in one place. It's people are getting their voice. So I think I agree with you. It's exciting. There's a lot to look forward to. One of the things we're going to be offering next year is a whole series on prepping for the energy of 2020. Not in this oh my God, what are we going to do? Everything's falling apart. But what can you do? And what are you prepared to do? And what vision are you going to be birthing and contributing to a new, I love all the words I've been used, epoch, and you guys use amazing words. There's been a few gestalt.
We have the best words.
The best words have come out of this panel.
The best words.
But anyways, no, there's something being birthed. There's something being birthed, and that I think all of us incarnated to be a part of this time for a reason. And there's something that we're contributing to that new vision that's being born. So,
I just wanted to say something about Adam was talking about the Bitcoin. A lot of astrologers have looked at this Uranus and Taurus time as that technology really being part of building a whole new value system, right? Think of it, Uranus and Taurus. It's quite literal translation of the archetype. But, when we talk about, Pluto and Capricorn, as I was saying, that's a generation being born, and then we have the synod coming, which we may see a further destruction. We may see further crumbling. That's okay, right? Because then, guess what? Everything that everybody's been talking about, Pluto goes into Uranus, and Pluto goes into Aquarius, and a whole new generation comes in with that kind of energy. So, everything that we're seeing, one generation leads into the next. I gave a whole 4-hour, 2-part lecture on the Pluto generations, starting back with Pluto Cancer and how each generation builds upon the next and where we're going. But think forward to Pluto and Aquarius, because that's not too far down the road either.
We are at our time. It's every single day of this event. I'm like, no, I want to spend more time. It's amazing. There's so much incredible conversation happening here. So many incredible ideas being exchanged. I love the interchange between all of you and the way that you're building upon each other's ideas, and you too, an audience who are asking these amazing questions. So thank you so much. I wanted to just give an opportunity for each one of you to leave the audience with anything that you have that you want to kind of just send off with. So I'm going to start with Becca.
Well, we've been speaking to this current moment, and it feels like such a potent moment, and something that came to mind actually in this feeling of being in a birth process. It reminds me of something that my very dear friend once said to me, which was, if someone were to watch a woman in labor and they had no idea what was going on, they would likely think that she was dying. And it feels as though we really are in a birth process, but not, I think sometimes that phrase can be used too lightly. Or when we speak of a death rebirth cycle, we skip a little over the death to get to the rebirth. And the recognition that part of the moment we're in does have to do with grieving what is being lost and learning how to feel it, to grieve in community, to let go in a way so that something new can emerge. And I want to hold that, the tensions of those seeming opposites that really are parts of a cycle, parts of a birth cycle, and what may look like death may indeed be birth, and what is birth must inherently honor what is dying. So, and I also just want to thank you, Amanda, for holding this space, and Patricia and Adam for being on this panel. And it's wonderful to learn from both of you as well. And thank you to the audience for being present.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Becca. Okay, how about you, Adam?
Well, somewhere between this order that we're finding and all this chaos, we're also talking about lives a dragon. And that's the title of my retreat in Maui in January. So if any of you live in Maui, like you, Amanda, I'll finally get to meet you in person, which would be wonderful. But if you want to come to Maui and escape the winter wherever you're at, January 16th through the 21st, leading into the eclipse, we're going to watch it on Haleakala. And that is going to be exciting. And like I mentioned too, my friend Sherry is going to be there, and she's going to be doing some alchemy, sabajiric talking. And this will be my third retreat, and it's always fun. It's just like a great incubator of like making lifelong friends and being able to like be around people from all over the world to geek out about astrology. It's a special space, and I'm really excited to switch it up a bit because my first two were here in Colorado, and so we're coming to Maui. And if you want to go to my site, you can learn about that and all the rest I do. Listen to my podcast, and that's holstoheavens.com.
Maui is a very amazing place to do the kind of work that you are going to be facilitating, Adam. It's just, there's a reason why people get off the plane and they go, oh, yeah, it feels so good here. I really think that people feel more connected with themselves here for whatever reason. Wherever it's placed on the planet, there's a really magical, potent, but gentle energy. So it's really nice for anything transformative. And I posted some pictures in our Inner Circle Facebook group of the sunset and moonrise last night from Haleakala, from the top of Haleakala. So yeah, check it out.
Cool, I will.
Okay, Patricia, anything you want to leave the audience with before we sign off?
Just staying with the theme of the time that we're in, and maybe leading into your next gathering that you're cooking up about what to do during Rin. To me, I guess the best word is transition. And transition, so the metaphor for me is the caterpillar transforming into the butterfly, and we're in the phase where there's a point in the caterpillar's transformation where it liquefies inside the cocoon. So it is neither, there's a moment or a period of time, short period of time, where it's, dissolving, and then it's literally just liquefies in the cocoon. And it is neither at that time a caterpillar and neither a butterfly. But one amazing thing happens during that time. And science has happily named, I call it a happy scientific coincidence. They say that there's these things kind of floating in that fluid called imaginal cells. I mean, really, they came up with that. They're called, it's the scientific name for them, imaginal cells. And it's the imaginal cells which give the, I'm want to use it, but it isn't really that, because it's even greater. The whole concept is even greater than that, but let's just go with that. It gives it the blueprint for the butterfly. So I would say we are in this liquid state. I mean, not only has Neptune been in Pisces for freaking ever, and it's not leaving very soon. So we are in this liquid place, and the liquid place can cause so much uncertainty and so much insecurity and so much, part of it's the power vacuum it creates on on a socio-political scale is actually, that's what frightens me. It's not any of you guys. It's not anybody who's in this kind of collective consciousness. It's the kind of what's going to fill up that power vacuum. Because, you know, there's always certain opportunistic energy when things are kind of, you know, crumbling or liquefying. So in this liquid time, I would say tune into those imaginal parts of you, right? You have imaginal cells. We are each, let's say we are each imbued with imaginal cells, this creative, active imagination, which is a very vital soul process. So allow yourself to recognize you're liquefying. It's undefined. Maybe you don't know where you came from, maybe you don't know where you're going, but out of that, something comes that's greater than what you thought it could be.
Love it. Thank you so, so much. You have been an incredible panel. This discussion has left so much for all of us to ponder and walk with and work with, really. And I love that. You know, we are the imaginal cells, and activating those within ourselves right now is a very productive thing we could be doing. Very timely and productive. So thank you so much. Thank you all for tuning in. I wanted to give you a few reminders. Tomorrow we have Henry Seltzer, Julene Lewis, and Donna Woodwell. Those talks will be released for you to watch at 7 a.m. Pacific time, and you'll have 48 hours to watch those for free. And make sure you tune in tomorrow at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern for our live Q&A panel with Henry, Julene, and Donna. And for those of you who are catching this on Facebook and you're not yet a part of this event, please make sure and register at summit.astrologyhub.com. It is not too late. We still have most of the summit still available for you. So please go ahead and register. Share this with your friends, your family, anyone who you think might benefit from the talks, the live Q&As, and all of the content, the bonus gifts, everything that's a part of this event. Let's see, anything else? Oh, and if you know that you would like to own the talks, both in video, audio, and in transcript form, if you know you want to own the bonus gifts to download at your convenience, you can do so with the upgrade package right now. It's $97 after the event. It's going to be $197. So this is the time to take advantage of that offer. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much for being a part of this. Thanks for showing up today. And thank you, as always, for making astrology a part of your life. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.